Everyone's talking about Iran, but no one's talking about how if Iran wins, the entire petrodollar system would end. This is a huge deal because this is the system controlling the entire global economy. When Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard in 1971, nothing was backing it anymore. So America decided to make a deal with Saudi Arabia. Sell your oil exclusively in dollars and we'll give you military protection. All the other major oil producing countries followed suit, and overnight the entire world needed dollars to buy oil. This gives the United States insane advantages, and it's why America dominates the global economy today. If any country like Japan or India wants oil, they need US dollars first. Therefore, there's always going to be demand for the US dollar, but there's more. If Saudi Arabia sells oil, they will earn billions of dollars. And what do they do with those dollars? They invest them right back into US bonds, US companies, and US real estate. The US basically created a system where the entire world funds American spending without even realizing it. And if a country steps out of line, the United States can cut them off the system completely, and that's what sanctions are. The petrodollar system.
Interesting enough, many people, just like me, we thought that the dollar was only backed by gold, and when President Nixon back in the 1970s took us off the gold standard, I was thinking that was the end of the value of the dollar, especially when many influencers like Dr. Kiyosaki and others began to call money fiat money, fake money. I was thinking the dollar lost its value, but never did I suspect that the US dollar bill has a deep connection to oil. Oil in terms of the agreements that the US made with the Saudi Arabian government, in terms of oil being exchanged in US dollars, played a big factor in what's going on right now with the Iran and US war that is kind of going on for oil, So
someone asked why it might be worrisome if Iran is only allowing oil trade through the Chinese currency and not the US dollar. The question to really understand is, why does the currency you trade oil in matter, and what happens when that starts to shift? First, you need to understand the background of the US dollar. You might have heard the term petrodollar. The dollar is called that because it's backed by the fact that oil or petroleum is usually traded in dollars on the global market. That's the foundation. So think of the dollar like a language. For 50 years, if any country on earth wanted to buy oil, they basically had to speak one language, being the US dollar, not their own currency. So every country learns this language, every central bank holds reserves of it, and the entire global economy becomes this room where everyone has to speak English to do business, and we are the only native speakers. Now, because every oil transaction speaks English, the US can hear every conversation. We can freeze accounts, block payments, and basically kick countries from the table. That's what sanctions really are, and they only work because everyone in the room speaks our language. So what happens when someone introduces a second language? Picture a concert where there's only one accepted ticket to get in, that ticket being the dollar. Everyone on earth needs your ticket to get in, which means everyone comes to you and relies on you, and you can pick and choose who gets in. Now, imagine the bouncer at the door starts accepting a different ticket. Suddenly, people don't need yours anymore, and so your leverage disappears. That's what's basically playing out right now.
Trump has collapsed the petrodollar. It's because of him that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. He has destroyed the fertilizer supply chain for this year's harvest. Millions of people are going to starve this year because of what he just did. The fertilizer did not go in the ground. The yield loss is already locked in, and the strait is still closed. And he's on Truth Social on Easter Sunday morning calling them bastards and threatening nuclear war at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. 45 million people are now facing acute hunger, but people are not realizing the severity of this because there's a delay. You put the nitrogen on the ground, you grow the crops, and you harvest them in September. If the crops are not now in the ground, you don't harvest anything in September. But Western media, very unethically and recklessly, keeps presenting this as food prices will be higher next year. War-driven fertilizer shortages don't just make your groceries dearer. His actions have already cut yield. That means less grain is being grown. The International Food Policy Research Institute has already done some modelling of what we face. This Iran war shock, this Strait of Hormuz block, is going to cause a drop in global cereal output of between 10 and 20%. And higher food prices is its own problem. Your politicians are telling you up front that the choice has already been made here. It's the poor who are going to eat less. And
Venezuela, they have the largest proven crude reserves on earth, more than Iran. Iran is number 2, they're number 1. So Saudi Arabia, they think is number 1. They're number 3, I think, or 4. Russia has some, we have some, but the big mother lode is in Venezuela. But it's heavy crude. It's very hard to refine and very hard to turn into gasoline. So Citgo is their big company. They do supply some gas, right? But they're not the biggest. But what they and Saudi and all the others, what they actually do that helps the U.S. economy, they all trade in petrodollars. So the petrodollar is an invention that the United States came up with, I want to say during the Nixon administration, where essentially they said, if you sell your oil in dollars and only in dollars, never put it in yen, don't put it in rubles, just do it in dollars. You sell your oil in dollars and then you take what's called that petrodollar and you deposit that back into the U.S. by buying U.S. bonds. That transaction of selling oil in petrodollars and then taking the proceeds and buying U.S. bonds is literally what props up our economy. No one talks about it. It's just too weird in the weeds and people in the news media don't think about it. But that petrodollar system is keeping our economy afloat.
Gave one condition to open up the Strait of Hormuz, and that was you must buy the oil in yuan, in Chinese money. And the American dollar is the petrodollar. Everybody need to buy oil with American money, and that's why we can sell treasury bonds and we can get the loans for free. No interest or none of that, because, we the world standard on the oil money. Now, Iran just switched it up. Chinese is now the oil standard. If you want the oil to move through the Strait of Hormuz, it's called. So, start buying Chinese dollars, y'all. Every empire comes to an end. We had a nice run.
So the United States went to war in the Middle East to protect what's called the petrodollar system, the most powerful system on earth. And there's a theory that says the U.S. may have accidentally or intentionally started the process of destroying it.
We are facing a real shock that is probably beyond what we can imagine at the moment.
And what we're seeing is what some people are calling the end of Pax Americana.
They know that if they choke off the straits and they only let Chinese ships, et cetera, come through and they settle the transaction in another currency, that they're eroding away at the petrodollar. And we also need the GCC to be on board. All the Gulf cooperation countries in the region, they've got to be on board with the petrodollar too. The reason why they went with the petrodollar is because we provided their security guarantees. Mm-hmm. Well, how are those security guarantees now? We can't defend them against what's taking place. We can't defend them from Iranian ballistics, Iranian drones. They know full well that the war was launched by Israel, and now they're suffering the consequence. So all of a sudden, we're not the best ally. So how long do we expect them to continue to settle their transactions in the dollar?
The U.S. dollar has no value. It's not backed against gold or silver. What the U.S. has is the petrodollar. The U.S. worked out deals to make the U.S. dollar the international currency for oil trade across the globe. So if we are not trading oil in dollars, the U.S. has a major problem because our dollar has no value without the strength of the petrodollar. Our government would collapse if people stopped trading in USD with oil. So when Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz, they made an alluding to that. They said, hey, if your oil and liquid natural gases are not being traded in USD, any other currency, especially the Chinese yuan, with the rise of BRICS, we'll let your ships through. They are actively trying to devalue the United States dollar because they understand that if oil is not being traded in USD, the US dollar is worth nothing because it's not backed against anything. This is also why we went into Venezuela. In case y'all didn't know, Maduro was going to start selling oil to China, but using the yuan. He was going to stop using USD. And that's when the decision was made very quickly to go in and take him out of power and try to get American oil companies to Venezuela to take over oil extraction and processing there to keep it in USD. Because if we start losing those trades using the US dollar, we lose value of our dollar, which will cause an economic collapse or at least a massive recession. So now Trump is panicking and demanding that other countries send military aid to the Strait of Hormuz to make sure we can open it up and get it all open. And but we also already destroyed their military, so you guys, you don't have to worry. We've already taken out their whole everything. But they might have put mines, so we just need you guys to come and help us out. Why can't y'all handle that? Why do you need other countries to handle that? No, you know that if other countries start to go into an energy crisis because oil isn't moving, if they have to buy oil in a different currency, they will, just to get the oil to their country. And I think this is why Trump wants other countries to get involved, to try to keep the status quo. But a lot of the countries are saying, absolutely not. We are not going to get involved, even if they don't realize it's about the petrodollar, but they will not get involved as of now.
Remember when I told you that we blew our bully aura with this war? Yeah. China said, what blockade? And sent they tanker through regardless. CNN just reported on it. That's like at a prison, if there was a war between the inmates and this gang done blocked off a whole section of the yard, like ain't nobody coming in, ain't nobody coming out. And then they send Chinese Debo through, like, and what you really gonna do about it though? You don't gotta be Tupac to know who really got the juice in that situation. And then there's these unconfirmed reports coming out where Trump says that there's 121 empty oil tankers coming from Hormuz to America to refuel. And everybody in his camp is like, oh, well played, 4D chess. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like he won something, until you realize the logistics of moving oil tankers. Do you know that each one of these things is so damn large, they carry 2 million barrels of oil per each one, that it takes literally 50 days to go from Hormuz to Houston, which means that they have to travel exactly that much time to go back to where they're going, or if they take the Pacific Ocean, it could take longer. Do you realize that that is still a gigantic interruption in the oil market? Likely, this report is capped, and realistically, who's going to take that route? When you couple that with, there's also reports, at least these ones are visually backed up, that Russia's sending tankers through, backed up with their own warships, and it becomes a real clear situation. If this happens, the petrodollar dies, and I'm going to tell you how. If it is true that Iran is only taking payment for the tolls in Chinese yuan, or we're talking about their own currency, that means that every single country holding trillions of dollars of U.S. Treasury bonds or debt of any kind or U.S. currency is forced to face a choice. Or do they want to stay loyal to the U.S. and hold on to our currency, or actually power their countries and keep their lights on? Which one do you think they're going to do?
Oh, China needs oil. China needs oil. No, they don't. Do you know why China doesn't need oil? Because one, they think long term. They have a lot of reserve. Two, their entire country is shifting away from oil. Like, they know this is not sustainable. And guess what? They're the biggest consumer of like oil. And people want to sell oil to them. They might sell it more expensive, but China has 99 problems and money ain't one.
Wait, it's not about their nukes?
No. Iran's central bank counts because their oil and energy is very important, including for China. If you're going to come out with programmable money,
with a revolutionary new payment system,
with digital IDs that are interoperable globally, that controls in each jurisdiction centrally, you can't afford leakage. Iran right now is the big leakage in the system. Now, Larry Fink and BlackRock have said
we need to move very rapidly.
They're planning on trading all stocks and bonds using tokens.
All investments on a tokenized platform.
What it means is this is going to be...
we have one common blockchain.
You know, potentially $100, $200, $300 trillion market. $100, $200, $300 trillion market.
Well, this is another major setback. Less than 24 hours after it was announced the Strait of Hormuz would open, it is now effectively closed once again. Iran announcing that it would resume control over the crucial waterway, putting out a statement saying that any vessels approaching the Strait of Hormuz Hormuz would be seen as cooperating with the enemy and would become targets. Now, we have seen evidence that Iran has followed through on that threat. Maritime authorities say that gunfire and a projectile strike were recorded involving 2 Indian vessels. India has summoned Iran's ambassador to express their concerns over what they called a shooting incident. Now, Iran says it has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz because it blames the US for breaching the ceasefire, and it has pointed to the US naval blockade of its Iranian ports, and it says that it will continue to keep that crucial waterway closed as long as the US continues this naval blockade. Now, US President Donald Trump briefly addressed this, and while he said that the US will not be blackmailed, he still appears optimistic that a peace deal can be reached soon.
And we have very good conversations going on. It's working out very well. They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years. They wanted to close up the strait again, as they've been doing for years. And they can't blackmail us.
Pakistani mediators are still pushing for Iran and the US to negotiate. They want them to come back and have direct talks and hopefully come to some kind of long-term agreement before the current ceasefire expires next week.
So let me get this straight, okay? So you go to war with a country, right? And now that same country might charge you $2 million just to pass through their waters? That's like picking a fight with your neighbor, then realizing that your driveway runs through their entire front yard. And now you're stuck. Because the Strait of Hormuz is not just a waterway. That is one of the most important shipping routes in the world. Oil, goods, supplies, everything moves through there. And now imagine, you either pay $2 million or your ships just sit there. And then here's the kicker. You pay the money, and then they turn around and use that same money to then keep on fighting with you. Now, there are no confirmed reports that this has actually been put in place yet, but Iranian leaders are already saying they have a right to collect these fees. And that's the reality, folks, because you can't just take somebody else's waterway. It don't just work like that. Now, I want to know, if your ship was stuck, would you pay the $2 million? Or would you just sit there and lose even more money? Because either way, that's one expensive decision